Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me today and keeping me company. I would like to send a special shout out to my subscribers and welcome you all back. I would also like to send a special shout out to the silent listeners and those who will be joining me for the first time. If you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and do so. And I would like to ask all of you for a great favor. Please go ahead and give the video a thumbs up from now on. Please do give the video a thumbs up. Go ahead, please. And of course, please share the video far and wide to all the persons you know who may be interested in this particular topic. And of course, you're all free and welcome to leave your comments in the comments section. I thank you all for your kindness. So, now that we've got the preliminaries out of the way, let's get down to business. What is business for today? The business of the day, again, is Stephanie Fiddler Blake. She was the manager for the declarations and financial investigation. Why is it that we are spending so much time on Stephanie? Because she is the key to everything regarding Andrew Holness's investigation into his statutory declarations. You heard me right. Now, something was sent to the Integrity Commission. We were told a letter of complaint was lodged with the Director of Information and Complaints, Craig Beresford, by someone called Mark Swaby. We don't know who that is, but he made certain allegations regarding the investigation into Andrew Holness's statutory declarations. He alleged that Kevon Stevenson, who is the Director of Investigation and the boss of Stephanie Fiddler Blake, yes, she reports to him directly. He is saying that Kevon Stevenson misconducted himself in his position and that Stephanie Fiddler Blake had concerns that she expressed in writing and sent to the Director of Corruption Prosecution when she was asked certain questions by that department. And that now is where now we come into it. We were at pains to try and discover what we could about the concerns that Stephanie Fiddler Blake had. And therefore, we went diving in and analyzing the statement to see if there's anything that could give us some clues as to what it was that she was concerned about. And I do believe that we may be onto something, and I'm going to be revealing what it is that I think in a moment. But for now, let us first remind ourselves of what it was that Mark Swaby said Stephanie Fiddler Blake was concerned about. And then we are going to break it down in segments that will now allow us to be able to do our own analysis of the facts such as they are that we are aware of. And of course, with your kind permission, I will now delve into that matter. We're beginning with the allegations made by Mark Swaby in that letter to the Integrity Commission. And in that letter, he said, among other things, the record of the Integrity Commission will indicate that an investigator, Stephanie Fiddler Blake, was moved to place in writing, following inquiries from the Corruption Prosecution Department of the IC, her concerns that steps being taken by the Commission in probing the Prime Minister's finances breached due process and possibly adversely engaged the law and investigative best practice. So what we're going to do is to slice it up and remove even more extraneous words and leave the meat of what her concerns were. Breaking down what Mark Swaby said, we can separate her concerns about decisions that were taken by the Commission when they were probing Andrew Holness's statutory declarations into three segments. First, she was concerned that steps taken breached due process. The second thing that she was concerned about was that the steps taken adversely engaged the law and that the steps taken adversely engaged investigative best practice. These are the elements, the three elements of what it is that Mark Swaby said that Stephanie Fiddler Blake was concerned about, which gave rise now to some obvious questions. What investigations took place? So what were the investigations that actually took place? First, they were probing the bank accounts that were not declared, the 4 bank accounts that were not declared. That was the subject of the investigation, the second investigation. But then there was also the matter of illicit enrichment. That also came up as a part of the investigation, which seems to me to be a separate part of the investigation. One to do with omissions and the other one to do with illicit enrichment. 2 different laws being affected. So those were the investigations that were taking place. Our next question is, who carried out these investigations? We know from the report that was tabled in Parliament that part of the investigation was carried out by a forensic expert, an international forensic expert. We want to know who made that determination and why. We want to know if Stephanie advised the engagement of this expert, and you will see why I say so shortly. And when the forensic expert completed their investigation and submitted their report, we need to know whether that report was given to Stephanie Fiddler Blake for her analysis and conclusion. And after that, we need to know if when she submitted her report to her boss, the Director of Investigation, Kevon Stevenson, did she include that forensic expert's report along with her conclusions? Were they included in her report to Kevon Stevenson? These are necessary questions that we need to ask and we need to have an answer to. And why we ask these questions and we would like an answer to is because we found out that Stephanie Fiddler Blake was the head cook and bottle washer when it came to the investigation into Andrew Holness's statutory declarations. And I'm going to show you what I am talking about now. We are going to look at the position and job responsibility of the manager of declarations and financial investigations in the IC. As it happens, they advertised on their website that the position is still vacant. They have not yet found a replacement for Fiddler Blake. Remember, she resigned last year, November 2024. We are now in April 29, 2025, and they're asking for persons to submit their applications by May 9, in another few days. Right? So they have not yet been able to replace her. Goes to show you that she was perhaps one of the few persons with the qualifications and experience to do the kind of work that the Integrity Commission needed for this particular position. And so they're having a hard time finding someone to replace her. On the website, they outlined the responsibility of the manager of declarations and financial investigations. So we are now going to look at those responsibilities and see what it was that Stephanie Fiddler Blake would have been in charge of within the Director of Investigation Division. And this will answer one of our questions. Who, within the Director of Investigation Division, carried out the investigations? And we are talking about the various aspects of the investigations because it had many aspects to it. So here we go. On the Integrity Commission website, career opportunity, manager, declarations, and financial investigations. And at the very beginning, they gave us a very interesting piece of information. Job summary: the incumbent is accountable to the Director of Investigation for the achievement of the entity's declarations and financial investigations objectives in order that the Integrity Commission achieves its mission and vision in a sustainable manner. In other words, they have confirmed that the person who is the manager of declarations and financial investigations, they are accountable to the Director of Investigation, that is Kevon Stevenson. That meant that Stephanie Fiddler Blake was reporting to Kevon Stevenson. He was her boss, right? And so whatever it is that her responsibilities in the department were, it was to Kevon Stevenson that she was responsible for reporting to. Follow that? Yes. So let us now get down into where it says major responsibilities. We are going to skip out what is not important to us and get down to the meat of the matter. What were her major responsibilities regarding investigations that were referred to the Director of Investigation Division? And we begin at line item number 6. It was Stephanie Fiddler Blake's responsibility to liaise with the Director of Investigation, Kevon Stevenson, and the other directors in the planning and execution of all financial investigation matters. So they are supposed to sit around a table, Kevon Stevenson, Stephanie, and the other managers, and they would then work out how they're going to go about a particular investigation. And having made the decision about how to go about the investigation, they then carry out the plans, right? They execute. That seems to me to be what that is saying. At number 7, it is her responsibility to provide the framework for investigation through the use of investigative techniques and equipment of allegations or suspected violations of criminal or civil statutes. And then they gave a list of what that entails. We'll come to that shortly. So, what is this now that she's responsible for? The framework of the investigation, right? She is the one who does that, not Kevon Stevenson or anybody else. And she's to use whatever equipment and technique that is available to her in order to establish this framework, right? And then that is to be applied to all the allegations or suspected violations of any law, whether criminal or civil statutes. That's what that is saying. So the framework for investigation that she needs to establish would be for A, procedures for interviewing persons, witnesses, and third parties, both formally recorded conferences or by written statements. So it is her responsibility, not Kevon Stevenson and not anybody else in the Integrity Commission, to deal with the matter of interviews of persons, right? You're talking about those persons who are under investigations, the interview of witnesses, and also the interview of third parties. She determines how that interview is done, whether it's going to be carried out at a conference where it will be recorded, or whether or not these persons are being interviewed by way of written statements. You follow? Yes, she does that. Nobody else. That she's the one with that responsibility. What other framework for investigation is she responsible for establishing? At B, it says that she establishes the links to facilitate the check credit sources, banking, and public records. What does that mean? As an investigative body, from time to time, they will need to do credit checks as well as get banking information and have access to public records. It is her responsibility to make sure that they have the links to facilitate those checks. So, when they wanted to find out whether or not a person has any company or is a director in any company, they would send to the company's office and ask them to do a general search to see if the person's name or the persons associated with them, those names come up. And that is her responsibility to establish those links between the Director of Investigation Division of the Integrity Commission and those other public bodies that have information that they need to carry out their investigations. You follow? Yes. It is also her responsibility, they said here at C, to develop template to facilitate the financial and behavioral profile of persons accused of bribery and corruption. So she is the one who deals with cases where the allegation is one of corruption and bribery. And it is her responsibility to create a template that would enable them the financial profile of such persons and the behavioral profile of such persons. What that is all about? Well, that sounds like some FBI business to me, and that in this case, she is a profiler studying the behavior of certain persons in order to catch them at whatever it is that they were doing illegally, I imagine. And she would have been the one with the responsibility to do this profiling, nobody else. Next, it says develops a template to facilitate the computation of net worth statements so as to determine illicit income. So now we know who it was that came up with the formula that determines whether or not a person's assets exceeds their lawful income. She is the one that came up with that formula that Kevon Stevenson put in the report that was put before the parliament, that Andrew Holness had $1.9 million that was accounted for in terms of his lawful income. Now, we know who is the one responsible, and she is the one that is responsible, not Kevon Stevenson, not anyone else. Next, her responsibility is to review the spreadsheets, graphs, and other information being presented as evidence. So any evidence that is being gathered, whether it be banking information, statements, witness statements, all of that is put in a spreadsheet, and she is the one who is responsible for reviewing them. Next, she reviews the reports covering the results of investigations. So each one of her persons, investigators in her department, I imagine that when they carry out their aspect of the investigations, they then write a report and send to her. She is the one who is responsible for reviewing those reports, right? Not Kevon Stevenson. No, he's a big shot, but she is the one that does the heavy lifting. So what have we learned so far? When it comes to the interviewing of persons, it is Stephanie Fiddler Blake who establishes the procedures. When it comes to credit checks and getting banking information and public records, she's the one who creates the links that would enable them to get the information that these bodies have in order to facilitate their investigations. She does the profiling. When it comes to the evidence, she's the one who reviews the evidence. And when it comes to the results of the investigations carried out, she is the one who reviews those reports. And here is one of the most critical responsibility that she has. It is her responsibility to review and analyze evidence to determine whether specific laws have been violated. It is her responsibility, not Kevon Stevenson and not anybody else in the department, to determine that. When it comes to the statutory declarations, it is Stephanie Fiddler Blake who has the responsibility to review and analyze the evidence that is before her when they conduct investigations, and then it is she who will determine which law was broken. Right? Very important. We must make a note of this. Then it says it's her responsibility to perform research and collect data through the use of interviews, documentary reviews, audit checks, or the exploration of any other sources of information to support the process in all investigation matters. What is it saying? It is her responsibility to do the research and to collect information. How? Through interviews. So she must interview people and extract information from them. She must do her research and gather all information relating to documentary evidence and review them. When she's doing her research, she is to get hold of audited reports in order to do her checks when she's investigating a company, in order to gather the information she needs for her investigation into that company's activities, financial activities, and any other source of information that she might be able to get her hands on in order to support her investigations. In this case, remember, they had hired a forensic expert in order to do some analysis of aspects of the investigation into illicit enrichment pertaining to Andrew Holness. Therefore, it seems to me that since it says here that it is her responsibility to use any other means, get information from any other source, that investigation report that was completed by the forensic expert, the international forensic expert, ought to have gone to her for her review and analysis, because it is her responsibility to gather the information that would help her in her investigation. You follow what this is saying at 9? Yes, it is not the director himself. It is not Stevenson who has this responsibility. It is her. She is the one who's supposed to research and collect information by whatever means it's saying here to assist her in her investigations. You follow? Yes, so we have established that that forensic report ought to have gone to her. Whether it did or did not, we do not know, because it was never included in the investigation report that was tabled in Parliament. It was her responsibility to confer with the attorneys. That word confer means she would have discussions with them, exchange views. So she has a responsibility to confer with the attorneys, tax administration officials and employees, and with members of other law enforcement agencies. So, under the law, the Integrity Commission has power to collaborate with other agencies. They have MOUs, so they can get information from the tax administration, from Titus office, company's office, and so on. So they have that power under the law. And what this is saying here is that that person with the responsibility in the Integrity Commission is the person who holds the position of manager of declarations and financial investigations. And that person at that time was Stephanie Fiddler Blake, right? She is the one who would confer with all of these outer agencies and gather the information that she needed from them for her investigation, or where she could not carry out the investigation because the law gave them the power to do so, she would refer the matter over to them. You follow? It's her, not Kevon Stevenson. Right? Good. It is also her responsibility to gather banking and other financial evidence as a result of court orders. Now, what does that mean? It seems to be suggesting that if there is a court order, she is the one who is responsible for going and getting that information, because Section 48 of the Integrity Commission Act gives to the Director of Investigation wide powers that I don't believe the police has. He doesn't have to go to court to get information about your bank, right? Section 48 exempts him from that requirement, right? And other requirement under the Secret Act, among other things. He has the power, the same powers as a commissioner in a commission of inquiry. That's what Section 48 says. So when you saw in his schedule of activities that he was writing to these banks and other financial institutions and quoting Section 48, right? He doesn't have to go like the police and go to court to get all the information, right? That's what the Integrity Commission Act did, gave him that power. This seems to suggest that if the court make orders for the provision of banking and financial evidence, it is her responsibility to go and get them. Seems to me what this is saying. Documents all evidence and enter as evidentiary documentation in relation to each investigation. So it is her responsibility to gather all the evidence relating to an investigation and create an evidentiary documentation of these evidence, which suggests to me that it will be in a format now to be presented before the court. That is what I'm thinking that this is saying here. It is her responsibility to also collate all the findings and source documents related to each investigation. What does that word collate mean? It means that she should collect all the findings and source documents related to the investigation. She must collect them and combine them. So if she's investigating Andrew Holness and she gathered information from banks and from the company's office, from the tax office, wherever the information comes from, she's to gather up all of that information now and put them together. That's what that means. I imagine as a single file. Then now it says her responsibility is to create a formal report. What is a formal report? It's an official report that is going to have now all her findings and so on in it. So her responsibility is to create a formal report in respect of each investigation that she does, that summarizes all the facts and presents relevant findings, conclusions, and recommendations. That is her responsibility. After the investigation is complete and she believes she has all the evidence that she needs, she is then to collate the findings and all the documents related to that particular investigation and then create a formal report respecting the investigation. She is then to summarize all the facts and present the relevant findings, conclusions, and recommendations. That is her job, including suggestions on whether the breach was facilitated by weaknesses in practice or procedures and possible measures to prevent the reoccurrence of the issue. And you do recall, I believe there were recommendations made in the report to Parliament regarding Andrew Holness's statutory declarations. But whenever you see the submission of an investigation report and recommendations as to changes that's needed in law, that was where that recommendation was coming from. It was coming from Stephanie Fidler Blake, right? Yes. So this is very crucial because now it says that she's to create a formal report. The next question is, who is that report to go to, having created it? Clearly, she has the director of investigation to whom she is accountable to. So any report that she writes must go to Kevon Stevenson as the director of investigation. That's who she reports to. So this is perhaps the most important information that we've gathered so far. There is a report that she writes to Kevon Stevenson at the end of each investigation. And in that report, she is summarizing the facts. She presents the findings, the conclusions, and recommendations. What kind of recommendations are we talking about? Remember that it is Stephanie Fiddler Blake who determines what law was being breached by the evidence that she gathered. Remember that? Yes. And bearing in mind that in the report that she created pertaining to an investigation, it is she who is asked to summarize the facts and present relevant findings. What were her findings? What conclusions she came regarding those findings and what she recommends. It is Stephanie Fiddler Blake who would have recommended that Holness should be charged or not be charged, as the case may be, based upon the evidence that she had before her. This is what I'm surmising from what is written here. When it says here that her responsibility is to summarize all the facts pertaining to the investigation, it is relating to the evidence. The evidences are the facts that she's supposed to present findings for. Having done so, she should draw certain conclusions and then make recommendations. What will be the conclusion? Whether the evidence shows that there was a breach of law and what law or laws were breached. And then she make her recommendations. Now, what would her recommendations be with regards to the evidence and the facts that she has presented relevant findings on and conclusions? It would seem to me that the recommendations would be whether or not the matter should be referred to the Director of Corruption Prosecution. But bearing in mind the language that was used, it says recommendation. She may make recommendations. And what is a recommendation? It is a suggestion or proposal as to the best course of action. So she is making a recommendation to her boss as to how she thinks they should proceed. He does not have to follow that recommendation. Are you following? Because she's making a suggestion, she's making a proposal that in her opinion, this is the best course of action. So if she said in her recommendation, based upon the evidence, I think that we should refer the matter to the Director of Corruption Prosecution. That is her opinion. When he reads the evidence, he may come to a different conclusion and decide not to refer. She may also decide, based upon the evidence, that we don't have enough evidence to continue. So therefore, she thinks they should abandon it. He may look at it and say, well, I see where we can go ahead and then make the referral to the corruption prosecution. Are you following? So he's not bound by whatever recommendation that she made. That's the point that I'm making. And I'm telling you this for a reason. She's also the one who coordinates and supervises all financial investigation matters. She assists the attorneys in the preparation of criminal cases for trial. The attorneys, who would those attorneys be? I would imagine that this would now be in the Director of Corruption Prosecution Division. So she would assist them. So this is perhaps the reason why Prince Kamika's division, the corruption prevention, according to Mark Swaby, he calls it a department, wrote to Stephanie Fiddler Blake for some information. They were making inquiries of her, and she responded that she had concerns about the way in which the commission was conducting the investigation. Now, that was strange because, based upon what we have read here, it is she who would have been responsible for those investigations. So clearly, it could not have been what she was doing, she was talking about, that was perhaps not legal, unless she's intimating that she was ordered to do certain things. And though she had reservations, she nonetheless carried them out. But I doubt that somehow. I think it must be something else that she was referring to. What that is, we don't know yet. But it necessitates us to return to that letter that Mark Swaby wrote and also refer to our memories of what was being reported on Nationwide News Network. You recall them saying that there were fundamental differences of opinion concerning aspects of her work. She had differences of opinion with some of her colleagues. Now, which colleague could that be? The only person that could have been asking her about her job would have been her boss, I imagine. So let us return now to what it is that Mr. Swaby is saying. Stevenson not only elected to exclude Miss Blake's concerns, which pointed to an unjust probe from the report he prepared for the Parliament, he did the rounds at the Commission and persuaded several senior colleague directors not to include Miss Blake's account in any of their formal considerations concerning the case. So, he is saying that there was something that she had said that was excluded from Parliament. She had some concerns, but it was about the conduct of the case. But what concerns could those be? When you look at the investigation report, which was tabled in Parliament, at 3.2, Kevon Stevenson said this: the investigation process and methodology. Any concerns that she had would have to appear here. So let us read on and see if we can discover something that she may have been concerned about, and whatever her concerns were was left out. It says, during the investigation, officers of the investigation division, which should have been her, pursue the following lines of inquiry or actions. A. Obtained information and witness statements from the responsible officers at the Information and Complaints Division of the Integrity Commission. She couldn't possibly have a problem with that. She was the one who would have obtained those statements, remember, as part of her job. And she would have gotten these statements from the Information and Complaints Division. They were the ones, after all, who referred the matter to the commission for investigation. Again, here it is that there were witness statements coming from the Houses of Parliament. This was to confirm when Andrew Holness started as a parliamentarian and his salary. It needed to have been confirmed by them. So she couldn't have a problem with that either. Then there is a matter of various financial institutions, statements were extracted from them. Is it possible that she could have a problem with that? Well, Section 48 of the Integrity Commission Act allows the Commission to ask these various financial institutions for statements on account for Andrew Holness. So nothing was wrong with that. The only thing I can think of where this is concerned is where the matter of illicit enrichment came into it. It was her formula they were using. Is it possible that that formula was not used correctly? Because it was this formula that she had created, which they used in order to trigger the investigation into illicit enrichment. But here is more. Do you recall in Andrew Holness's affidavit in the lawsuit that he filed, where he said that At those meetings that he had with the Integrity Commission where they read him his rights, at no point did they tell him in the interview or any time thereafter what was the figure they said was involved in his illicit enrichment. In other words, they said his assets exceeded his lawful income. They never said by what amount. That's what he's alleging in his affidavit. That's what he said. So we are back to it again. Why is it? And remember now, it is Stephanie who would have been responsible for setting the procedure of the interview that would have been done with Wholeness. That was her responsibility. If what he is saying is so, and indeed, in the report to Parliament, they never said they told him what the figure was either. How come? Is this a procedural error on their part? Because when you look at the remaining information that they had requested, right, from the Companies Office, the National Land Agency, Tax Administration Jamaica, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, auditors of companies associated with Wholeness, and directors and shareholders of associated business. What is in that? There is nothing in that. So therefore, the only thing we are left with is this illicit enrichment and the fact that it appears from the report that was tabled in Parliament that they never told Andrew Holness what the figure was that he was supposed to have been investigated for. What was the amount by which his assets exceeded his liabilities? They never said, and it was never reported in Parliament that they said they told him so. So we must now return to the allegations made by Mark Swaby about what he said was the concerns of Stephanie Fiddler Blake and see whether or not this fits the bill. What we're doing basically is looking for all possibility of concerns that she would have in terms of what went down, because somewhere along the line, one of them would be correct. We just don't know which one. So he said here that her concerns was that the commission had taken steps in probing the Prime Minister's finances, which she said breached due process. And this fits the bill. How can you be telling a man that you're investigating him for illicit enrichment, to which the law requires that he should provide you with an explanation for how it was that his assets exceed his liability, and you not tell him how much money? So how he was going to defend himself? He could not. You did not put him in a position to defend himself against the allegation, and then you turn around and refer the matter for him to be prosecuted because he failed, according to you, to give you an explanation. Are you following me, my people? So this is possibly one area for sure where there was a breach. As to whether or not this was what Fiddler Blake was talking about, that we don't know, but at least we spotted something that would definitely be a breach of due process. I do believe that this matter is before the court, right? So the judge will determine whether or not due process was breached. Now, there's another matter that I discovered, and it is a very serious matter. And this revelation is what I would regard as a bombshell. And what is that bombshell? You will recall that this investigation started when the Integrity Commission said that Wholeness failed to declare 4 bank accounts, 2 for his mother, 1 for his father, 1 for a constituent. And Wholeness was interviewed and read his rights concerning those 4 accounts. And they said they had received information from the Bank of Nova Scotia that he and his sister were joint holders in his mother's account. You remember that? Now, they elicit certain information from Wholeness, having showed him what the statement from the Bank of Nova Scotia said. They showed it to him first. It was exhibited at 8 and 9. And they asked him to then say how he was associated with these accounts, having showed him the information from the Bank of Nova Scotia. And they did this knowing that the statement before them did not have Andrew Holness's name on it. The letter they sent to him requesting certain information was written on the 18th of August 2023, and his response to the letter came to them September 29, 2023, and this is a bit of the conversation. Now, this letter and the information you see here, you'll find in Prince Kamika's report that was tabled in Parliament. That is the Director of Corruption Prosecution and her findings. That's where you'll find this item. Now, that is not the only thing in this matter pertaining to those accounts. You're now looking at paragraph 13 of Kamika's report that was tabled in Parliament pertaining to the Andrew Holness investigation. And this is what Kamika reported. A statement from another authorized officer at the Bank of Nova Scotia dated June 11, 2024. Remember, the letter that was originally sent to Holness to answer about these accounts was sent to him August 18 of 2023. By June 11, 2024, another authorized or officer at the Bank of Nova Scotia, not the same one who claimed that Holness was a joint account holder with his mother, not that one, a different one from Scotiabank now, made a statement. And that statement was dated June 11, 2024, outlines the procedure for effecting joint ownership of an account. The statement noted that in relation to Bank of Nova Scotia account number 60, the relevant signature sheet does not assist in determining when the Honorable Prime Minister was added to the account, as that document is illegible. Additionally, no other evidence was provided on file to establish whether independently or from questions posed to the Honorable Prime Minister when he became a joint account holder for the account. The banking transaction for this account for the period 2017 to 2023 only show his mother as the owner, and therefore it cannot be confirmed or inferred that the Honorable Prime Minister was a joint holder during the period covered by the transaction history, and the same was also true of the other account, number 64. It went on to say the fact that the transactions were observed from another account held solely by Holness to this account does not give rise to an inference that he was a joint holder during the specific period 2021. In other words, not because the Bank of Nova Scotia sent and told you that, say Holness is a joint account holder with his mother, you have to ask more questions. When they go and check the signature sheet, it is illegible, cannot be read. It's old. When you look at the statement, only her name alone on it, which means in the account system that they have at Bank of Nova Scotia is only the mother's name is in it. Right? So Holness had nothing to do with the account. And logically, that would be so. And I can explain. How many of you would remember the days when you had to go to the bank and then when you go to withdraw your money, they go for the signature card. You have to wait till them find the card and then look at the signature and then compare what you have on the withdrawal slip with the signature. And then on that basis, they give you your money. You remember that? Okay. Now, Bank of Nova Scotia, they computerized their system. And they would have done that either in the late 80s or early 90s, somewhere during the 90s. So that would have been closer to the event in 75. So just prior before they became computerized, they would have been relying on these cards, these signature cards. So what happened? When they converted and they became computerized, what they were doing, they took all the cards and then they scanned the information on the cards into their system. And as I said, the cards would have been legible at that time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to give you your money. So let's think this thing through. So they would have scanned the signature card for Wholeness's account. Had there been his name and his sister's name on the account, that information would have been scanned into their system and they would have had that information in their system to this day. So the fact that Wholeness and his sister's name is not in them system shows that when they scan the information from the card, their name never depend it in the first place. You see the logic? Yes, because if it was there, they would have scanned it into them system and them go in and look and them see it. So if there were to be a court order now and the court ordered them to go and look in them system to see if them say Wholeness and the sister's name, because if it was on the signature card at that time, it would have been scanned. When them go look, they would not see them. And that is the reason why it's only the mother's name that appear on the statement, because the children's name were never on the signature card in the first place. So the question we have to ask is, who the hell at the Bank of Nova Scotia told the Integrity Commission that Wholeness was joint holder with his mother on those two accounts when nothing go so? And when them clearly saw the statements and that is the mother's name, somebody discovered it and wrote back to them and asked them. They then go back and look on the signature and say, it's not legible. But it would have been legible at the time when it was scanned into them system. You see the point that I'm making? On the 11th of June 2024, they would have discovered that they had no evidence to show that Wholeness was a joint holder with his mother. And therefore, they should have left that out of them investigation report. Instead, a strange thing happened. On the 30th of August 2024, 2 months and 19 days later, Kevon Stevenson wrote in his report, which was tabled in the Parliament, that Andrew Wholeness was a joint holder with his mother. Not only did he say so, he went and published the woman's banking information, call her name, and put in the report how much money was going between her account and Wholeness account and Wholeness account and her account when they have no legal basis to do so. The man was not on his mother's bank account. He was not, and they had no evidence, and yet Kevon Stevenson went and did that. But if you think that that was all that he did, look at this piece of evidence I have to show you now. Look at what Prince Kamika said in her report that was tabled in the Parliament. Now, her report was dated September 2, 2024, 3 days after Kevon Stevenson would have written and dated his report. 3 days after. Now, in the background, this is what Prince Kamika reported. The first paragraph. On July 19, 2024. Make a note of that date. On July 19, 2024, the Corruption Prosecution Division received a case file from the Director of Investigation for a determination to be made as to whether the evidence collected met the prima facie standard for a viable prosecution to be mounted against the Most Honorable Mr. Andrew Wholeness, Prime Minister of Jamaica. It was alleged inter alia, among other things, that the Honorable Prime Minister committed the offense of making a false statement in a statutory declaration contrary to Section 43(2)(a) of the Integrity Commission Act. This was what she reported, that the referral case file came to her on the 19th of July 2024 in this matter. Now, you recall that on the 11th of June 2024, just a month and 7 days before that, they already knew at the Integrity Commission, at least Stephanie Fiddler Blake knew that Andrew Holness' name is not on his mother's account and that she had no evidence. So when the director of investigation sent the case file to Kamika, he would have done so after he received his report from Stephanie Fiddler Blake. You follow? In other words, Stephanie Fiddler Blake would have gathered up all the evidence she needed, and she would have collated that evidence with other statements. She would have done a formal report in which she would have stated all the facts, right? And then make recommendations. In that formal report, she would have included this letter from the officer at the Bank of Nova Scotia, which shows that Andrew Holness was not a joint holder in either of his mother's two accounts. And she would have put that in her formal report. She would have then sent that formal report to her boss, Kevon Stevenson, and he would have known that Andrew Holness was not a joint account holder in either of his mother's account. And yet, he went and referred the matter nonetheless to the Director of Corruption Prosecution. Right? Now, not only did he do that, but on August 30, he compounded the issue by putting in his report that was tabled in Parliament a claim that he must have known was a damn lie at the time, that Andrew Holness was an account holder with his mother and that they had evidence to that effect. He then went and talked about the woman's accounts, call her name, talk about the amount of money in the account, how much money she withdraw and gave her son, and how much money the son gave her back. And he must have known and ought to have known that what he was doing was not right. He was breaching the woman's privacy. He had no basis at all in which to put that in a document that was going to be made public. And the commission is talking about what? Retaining his services? Uno, call Carol Beswick there for me, please. In fact, Mrs. Beswick, me know you're busy. Send this and give her for me, please. If you're on very friendly terms with her and you know her well enough, send this to her. And I want to ask you, Justice Beswick, if this suggests to you the kind of conduct of an investigator that you want to remain in the Integrity Commission. He knew that Andrew Holness' name was not in his mother's account because he had the information there. He was writing down his own report to send it off, and he knew. And yet, he went and included her information in his report of the 30th of August, knowing that Andrew Holness was not an account holder. In other words, Justice Beswick, he lied to the Parliament. There needs to be an inquiry into this matter. There needs to be an inquiry into the matter, in particularly the fact that somebody called Mark Swaby made a complaint on the same matter and UNO cannot investigate UNO self. And I do not believe the law contemplated that UNO would be corrupt, and therefore it did not say what UNO is supposed to do. But it is a very simple matter. It's a very complex matter, but it's a simple matter. The Prime Minister himself cannot, I don't think, ask the Governor General to investigate of himself, because he is also the subject of the matter that is in controversy. And therefore, it is my suggestion that the parliamentarians, somebody in the parliament, should move a motion that ask the Governor General or demand that the Prime Minister should ask the Governor General to do an investigation into the matter. And if it is passed by the two houses, then Andrew Holness would have no choice more than to obey his parliamentarians. That to me is a solution. The MPs in the House must demand that there needs to be a thorough investigation into this matter. It's a serious thing. And it is only the Governor General who can convene such a tribunal under the law. And that recommendation must come from the Prime Minister. And since he is the subject of the investigation, then it is the parliamentarians who must now get up, move the motion, and pass the resolution so that the Prime Minister can go to the Governor General with the resolution passed by his parliament that he must do an investigation into the Integrity Commission into this matter. And we're talking about the matter of the allegations that there were cogent information that was left out of the report to Parliament. And the allegation that I'm making now that he lied to Parliament when he said that Andrew Holness was joint holder on his mother's account and gone borrow out woman business when he ought to know differently. You know, Mrs. Beswick, this doesn't smell good at all. Not smell good. Stink to high heaven. There is something rotten in the state of Denmark. And if uno get this idea into uno head that Kevin Stevenson is going to remain there, I would suggest uno take it out of uno head. He needs to go. Could you possibly say, Mrs. Beswick, that what Kevin Stevenson did was in the public interest? His investigator, Stephanie, would have written to him in her formal report that she has a statement from the Bank of Nova Scotia which shows that there is no evidence that Andrew Holness is a joint holder in his mother's account. The statements that they had before them pertaining to the account was in his mother's name alone. And the bank did not have on their system anything to show that Holness was indeed a joint holder. And when they went to the card was not legible. But we know that when they scanned the information in the first place, if Andrew Holness' name was on that card, the system would have scanned it in with his mother's name and the signature. And that did not appear on Scotiabank system. It would have been a scan in order to capture the signature. And the name would have also been there on that card. And therefore, if it's not in their system, it really no matter whether or not the card is legible. It means to say it was never there in the first place. What can we call Kevin Stevenson's actions other than corrupt? A misuse of his office for some kind of a gain. We don't know what that gain is, but we don't need to know. If he purposefully did what he did, it doesn't matter whether we know what the reasons were or not. Once it is purposefully done, it is corrupt. He's not supposed to use his office in this way. And therefore, any contemplation uno could have in uno head to keep him on, divorce uno minds of it. What he did was corrupt. What he did was not in the public interest. He maligned a man's character, and on top of that, he exposed private information of a citizen of this country, and he used his position corruptly in order to do so. Now that you all know, all of you who sit on that commission know, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Because you have to do something. And I don't have to tell you what. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening, for sharing, subscribing, and giving the video a thumbs up, as well as leaving your comments in the comments section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.